This is a revision podcast for child language acquisition theorists. The first theorist we're going to look at is a behaviourist theorist, Skinner. He believes all behaviour is conditioned by experience until it becomes automatic. If we do something and receive positive consequences, we will do it again. Language is acquired through imitation and reinforcement. There are some issues with this theory. Children appear to construct sentences they've never heard before. I runned away. Children recognise more words than they can use. All babies show similar cooing and babbling features. Children don't always respond to correction, and children aren't always corrected. The next theorist we're going to look at is Noam Chomsky, who studied the nativist approach. He found that children have a language acquisition device, an innate ability to acquire language. This allows language to be taken in and for grammatical rules to be applied. He said this because children resist correction, children acquire language in specific patterns and pass through the same early stages of language acquisition. There are some issues with Chomsky's theory. The theory underestimates Skinner's view that interaction, imitation and reinforcement are important in language development. If you take into the account of Jeannie Wiley grew up with no influences to help her learn language, and when she was found, she simply couldn't speak. Bard and Sachs studied a child with deaf parents who learned to speak using television and radio. He needed a speech therapist to learn to speak and communicate effectively, showing that he required human contact to learn. Chomsky underestimates the crucial need for pragmatic understanding when learning to speak. Eric Lenberg is another follower of the nativist approach. His theory was called the critical period hypothesis, and it stated that without social development before the ages of 5 or 6, language development can be seriously limited. There are some issues with this theory. For example, a second language can be learned at school, and biological innateness is different in every person. Moving on to the cognitive approach, Jean Piaget studied that children are active learners who use their environment and social interactions to shape their language. Children cannot be taught until ready. The children need certain mental abilities before they can acquire particular aspects of language. There are several stages to this cognitive approach. The first is sensory motor, which occurs in the first 2 years of a child's life. The child is unable to imagine that objects exist out of their range of vision. This is why babies sometimes cry when their mum or dad isn't there, because they think that they don't exist anymore. The next stage is pre-operational. From 2 to 7 years of age, children are egocentric, which means they only think of themselves, but their language and motor skills become more competent. The next stage is concrete operational, which is between the ages of 7 and 11. Children begin to think logically about concrete events. And formal operation, which is the last stage, is from 11 years and above, where the child begins to understand abstract concepts such as past, present and future. There are some issues with this cognitive approach, however. It doesn't explain how people with learning difficulties learn to speak fluently. It also doesn't consider the role of interaction in this theory. The next theory is an interactionalist theory by Jerome Bruner. It says, for language to develop, there must be a language acquisition support system, or LAS. This is where caregivers support their children through social situations. There are patterns of interaction between child and caregiver throughout the day. For example, mealtime, playtime, reading time, bath time, etc. These ritualised events allow the child to become, eventually, a more active member of a social situation. It says that if children are deprived of this support system early on, they struggle to acquire it later. The next theorist is a socio-cultural theorist, Lev Vygotsky. His theory says that language development is related to social interaction and experiencing different social and cultural contexts. It says our community helps us make meanings. There are 2 stages to this theory. Number 1, private speech, which is speaking alone, and number 2, the zone of proximal development. This is where a model is provided which can be applied to a similar situation which might arise in the future. Michael Halliday is a theorist who supports functionalism. This theory supports the importance of social interaction. It suggests that children learn words to satisfy physical needs, emotions, and social needs. Halliday has 7 functions of speech: instrumental, fulfilling a need, want milk; regulatory, the influence of behaviour to others, pick up; interactional, develop and maintain a relationship, love you; personal, to give personal opinions, me like Charlie; representational, conveying facts and information, it hot; imaginative, creating imaginary worlds, me shopkeeper; and heuristic, to learn about the environment, what's that? Child-directed speech, also known as CDS, is the ways that caregivers interact with children. Child-directed speech has many different features which fall into quite a few different categories, and I'll go through them now with you, starting with phonology. The phonological features of child-directed speech include intonation, which is often exaggerated to stress more strongly on different words. Pitch is usually higher, repetition occurs, and pace is often a lot slower. Another category of the features of child-directed speech is lexis, which includes simplified vocabulary. Caregivers use reduplication, for example chew-chew or din-din. They use addition, which is like doggy. A high proportion of words will be used for things that the child can see or hear. And finally, there's lots of imperatives. Another category of child-directed speech features includes grammar. Sentence structures are often simplified and function words are omitted. Proper nouns are often used instead of pronouns. For example, Annie making a sandcastle. A higher proportion will be concrete nouns also, and present tense will be used the most. Another category is pragmatic development. Features of this category include that caregivers will ask a lot of questions trying to create a dialogue. Conversations are maintained mainly or exclusively by adults. Children start turn taking between the ages of 2 and 4, trying to take part in the dialogue, and children become more aware of politeness forms, using people's names to gain attention, and the needs of a listener through pragmatic development. Other features that don't fall into a category include recasting, which is taking what a child says and rephrasing it, and another one is expanding on what a child says to get more information. The impact of CDS. Child-directed speech isn't always helpful. Not all cultures use it, and there is no evidence that its absence makes the language acquisition deficient in any way. Some people argue that by using CDS, it is limiting the language acquisition because the children are not listening to proper forms of conversation. Be aware of all these theories for the A2 English language exam. Good luck.